Thanks for joining us for another episode of Mid-American Gardener. I'm your host, Tanisha Spain. And joining me in the studio today are two of our panelists who have brought lots of cool stuff to talk about, and they're going to be answering your questions. So before we get started, let's have them introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about them, and then we'll go for it. So Jen, we'll start with you.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Nelson. I am an instructor for the Department of Crop Sciences at the University of Illinois, and I also have a blog, groundedandgrowing.com. I write about all kinds of gardening things. I love helping people answer questions, figure out what's going on in their garden.
Yes, I always have to, I'll be texting Jen when certain things come up in the yard, or if I've mixed up my seeds and I don't know what's what. She is great at plant ID. So
There you go, Jen.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right, Chuck.
Hi, I'm Chuck Voigt. I retired from the University of Illinois the first day of 2016, which is a little mind-boggling. My responsibilities there were vegetables and herbs. First I worked with growers, and then as time went along, I taught a class in home horticulture to non-majors, so that was kind of all-encompassing. So we'll try to answer whatever we can today.
Okay, and you love flowers and vegetables
Flowers
and
and
fruits
vegetables and fruits and herbs.
all
and,
the things.
Yeah.
So we've got two great ones today, two generalists I would like to call you by. Okay, so Jen, we'll start with you, the victim of clever marketing.
The victim of clever marketing. We're all vulnerable to this.
We
not
are.
just me.
We are.
So I'm shopping, and you come across these things, and these are some summer flowering bulbs. And if you were to wait, you'll find these same things at the nursery already growing, and more expensive than what I paid for them as just the dormant bulb. And a couple of things I want to point out is that you should and can and should start these early so that you can put out at least a tiny start out in the garden. But a couple of things different in the packaging of these. So start with this one. This is a tuberous begonia, and they are little bulbs inside. And you can actually see kind of through the plastic, and I can see that there's little tiny sprouts on them, and I can feel the bulbs, and they're not squishy, so I know that they're decent shape, ready to be planted. This one is kind of it's a bag, but it's kind of a box. I can't really see inside, so I have to just trust that it was a good deal, and it's got pretty pictures, and hopefully they're decent bulbs inside. I'm taking a chance, to be honest, and it caught me in a vulnerable state, in a vulnerable store. But I'll take a chance on it and see. I know these were just freshly put out for sale, so I know they weren't, this isn't like June and I'm finding this on a bottom shelf somewhere. So hopefully they came from the supplier in somewhat decent shape and I can get them started. And I'll probably start them, I'm debating about whether to start them in individual pots or in like more of like an open flat, but then I might have roots getting tangled, so I don't know which will be better. I'll just see what I have.
Okay.
In the supply.
So that's a good time to talk about when you are at a store, at a nursery, just go over a little bit more some tips if you're looking at bulbs, because I've seen some of the grocery stores and Menards and the other places, they're all putting them out. So if you're looking for bulbs,
well, like
what are some tried and true?
Tried and true thing. Look for something that feels heavy for its size. Look for something that's not squishy is bad. Squishy is bad in the world of produce generally,
and super light
and super
and dry
lightweight
is
and
bad.
fluffy. You generally don't want them to be growing too much already. A little tiny sign of life is okay, but like a stem
a sprout has forced
sprout
its
is
way
coming
out of the
out of the stitched top of
Seen
the
those
bag.
before.
Not good. No, but other bulbs you might see this time of year, just coming off Easter, is you have a lot of forced bulbs in pots. People ask about those because you'll see those discounted. Price to move them out, and they're the flowers are done and there's this greenery, and maybe the greenery looks kind of half dead. I'm prone to it. If it's like a good price, I will try it.
They're coming home with you.
No, but like seriously, if it's not dead yet, I will plant them and see. You might not get flowers the next year, depending on how badly the greenery was watered. But it might take a year or two to. But I have some that I've had from like my wedding shower or whatever. Then I've stuck them in the ground. I've got some little baby tiny Tita daffodils that were from way back when, and they are still going strong.
It's always worth
So
a shot.
it's worth a shot if the price is right. That's my motto.
Yeah, I have bulbs that I rescued from the dumpster at Plant
See,
Sciences
we
Lab.
all do it. We all do it. It's not just me.
Can't stand to see them go.
No.
They should have a lid on it if they don't want us to dumpster dive.
Oh, I have benefited from that dumpster too, a time or two.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. I would add, when you see like little packaged, like small fruits and grapes and those kinds of things at those places, usually they show up in late winter and they put them out at room temperature, out
Right.
of cold storage.
Right, and they're like, oh,
The
spring.
buds break. You know, they don't get LED lights.
Right.
They get
Fluorescent.
Yeah.
not
Yes.
much of anything, and they send up their poor little sprouts, and they're pretty sad. So
Yeah.
if you don't get those pretty near when they set them out, it's sad. I was looking at some grapes the other day, and there was like 3 or 4 varieties. 3 of them had sad little sprouts. The 4th
Yeah.
one, nothing, which tells me that
Maybe
that
it's
one
dead.
that one is pretty nearly dead. So we can rescue things from some
Right.
sort of
Gotcha.
peril, but not necessarily from death.
Right.
If you have a bulb that's got a bad spot on it, is the entire bulb, do you pitch it, or can you cut that out? Can you cut a bad spot off?
I've never tried cutting it. Have you?
It seemed like that might open it up to
Yeah.
more,
Even
more
more.
problems
Okay.
than you know. But
Than it's
again,
worth.
being both cheap and horticultural, I might try to plant it anyway.
I would probably put it in and just see where.
Survive or don't.
Yep,
But I'm
survive
giving
or
you,
don't,
I'm giving you
yeah.
a shot.
I've told people that you're not a true gardener unless you've killed the same plant at least 3 times.
Nice.
So
Okay.
try it.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Jen. Go ahead, Chuck. Which one do you want to do first?
Let's talk about the shallots.
Shallots.
Or do you say shallots?
Shallots. Whichever makes me sound.
I'm okay with both of those.
Yes.
I get a little ticked off at the Food Network people who insist on calling Swiss chard. Anyway, so I surprised myself and actually got some things planted.
Oh,
I got 3 different colors of onion sets planted.
nice.
And just when choosing those, don't go for the biggest, because the biggest tend to make flowers.
Okay.
And so kind of intermediate up to about 3/8 of an inch would be ideal.
Okay.
At one of the big box farm stores, they know me. I go in there and I pick out my 25 of each individually.
Because they have the big barrel, right?
Yeah, they have
we
a
that
big
box.
bin.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they have the
And
fat
you
ones
just
with
painstakingly.
you know,
Yeah.
and if you're growing onion sets to have green onions, then the fat ones are great because they'll grow up faster and bigger and whatever. But if you really wanted to make onions, you want maybe not the tiniest ones because they might not have enough energy, but not the biggest ones either. And the other thing I got planted were shallots,
Okay.
and they did really well last year. The ones I had kind of gone downhill. I don't know if they picked up virus or what was the problem, but they were pretty disappointing. So last year I bit the bullet. I went to a different big box store and bought 3 little bags of shallots,
Yes.
each which had, I think 2 of them had 5 and 1 of them had 6, which is like, my goodness, it wasn't but you look at them in a catalog and they're $12, $13, $14 for a pound or a half a pound, and that's even more ridiculous. So anyway, I planted them last year. They did exceedingly well. And I mean, that's
a big one.
That's
a big
a
one.
dandy. We talked at the farm a couple of years ago on a hot day about the seed grown ones.
Yes.
When they originally came out, I was okay with them, but the ones that I grew that time we were talking about them got huge and were extremely pungent. They smelled
gonna ask.
They smelled like really hot onions,
Oh.
and I think maybe with the urge to grow them from seed, they've gotten too much onion in them and not enough shallot in them. So if you want the true shallot flavor, I would say get a vegetatively propagated one, because those others don't even grow correctly. They
I've asked you this before, but could you describe the difference in flavor between shallots and onion?
Uh,
Is it more mild?
It's got a little more a hint of garlic in it.
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
all the
Shallots, I
same
think,
family.
are maybe a little intermediate between garlic and,
Okay.
and onions, and also slightly less of that extreme sulfurous
Right.
pungency.
Gotcha.
But you plant the ones I planted were much smaller than this, and still we got 6 to 12 in a cluster of these, which is
What's your favorite dish to cook them in, or everything?
oh man, I whatever's handy.
Whatever's handy.
Yeah.
Would you use them kind of like an onion, kind of like a garlic to do the saute in the
Yeah.
beginning?
My husband uses them for risotto instead of onion.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Okay.
The higher end dishes that you're making, and I always say people who think this is just a small onion and it's too much trouble to peel them. It's like buy a big onion. Don't
Don't waste your time.
yeah. If you don't know more about a shallot than that, then
So you have to appreciate those.
right.
All right.
So that's good. There's one other thing that there's what's called a potato onion, which is interesting because if you plant a small one of the potato onions, it'll grow into a big, like 3-inch onion. You plant the big ones, and you get a whole cluster, kind of like shallots, but they're more like a true onion. But they kind of alternate generations. So
Very cool.
that's another fun thing that
When will these be harvested? The ones that you planted?
probably July-ish.
Okay.
Because of the weather this year, I got them in March, which is fairly ideal. But last year, I think I got them in somewhere in April, and might have been around the 1st of August. But they'll tell you the tops, like onions, will fall over and start to dry up. And
Do you have to hang these to dry, like onions, like
Well,
garlic, or can you use them
you-
straight away?
well, you can use them straight away, but to get them to keep, you want to like put them in a flat layer and let them dry down, and
Gotcha.
and then keep them at maybe a cool room temperature. You don't want to, like onions and garlic and all those things, you don't want to refrigerate them because that sets off a whole other range of things. But
Very nice.
I was really pleased with myself that I got the things in really on schedule this time because
Hey.
because with that warm weather that we were having
Yes.
in well, even in February, I was getting that, oh
crazy.
my gosh, it's getting late feel of it, and I
Yes.
knew it wasn't true, but there's the soil, it's dry, it's ready to work, and
Stick it in.
Yes.
I figured what'll handle that, and I said onions and shallots, and then the other day I also put in some radishes and lettuce and spinach, which
Nice.
Right on schedule, Chuck. You're on schedule. I wanted to ask you, do you pre-sprout? Will you be pre-sprouting those, or do you pre-sprout like your
these
cannas?
bulbs, this is
Yes.
what I want to do is to sprout
Now,
them
how do
ahead
you
of
do
time.
that? Do you put them in a container, like a
I'm
clear?
gonna do that. I'm debating about do I put them in individual pots or I've got some big flats. I could just kind of do them in rows. I don't want them. They're not necessarily going to be in there forever, but these take forever when we've just put them in the ground as bulbs, and you're waiting half the summer to see like a single leaf.
Yeah.
So but if on some years we've bought them as plants, they do a lot better. So I want to get them up and growing.
Interesting.
I don't know. I will see what I have like in the garage and,
Yeah.
and see what I
What
how
you
to-
can play with out there.
Yeah.
Karen, and the reason I ask is because she pre-sprouts a lot of her cannas,
Mm-hmm.
and she got me doing that last year, just putting them in a big plastic tote with some peat
Yeah,
moss or potting
just to get 'em going.
soil, and then put them outside. But I didn't know if that would work for something
Yeah,
like that.
I'm going to do that, and I actually got some of these from my mom. Not this a different type, but different color. But these can all be brought in as houseplants if you're good with them. Like my mom is the African violet whisperer. She can keep
wow.
any
That's the
flower.
one I killed.
Right, she can keep it all going, and you can let it dry down and go dormant and hold. And what I like about putting stuff like this will go in a pot, so I'll just bring the pot in the garage and it can overwinter in there. But you could also bring it inside and treat it as a houseplant if you want.
Gotcha. Okay.
It probably won't work very well for me. It tends to get mealybug.
Yeah.
So, but if you're good at keeping tabs on that,
Okay.
and if you have a choice, things like caladiums and tuberous begonias are way slower than things like cannas.
Right,
so if you
right,
have a choice
right.
to make, a canna will sprout in the ground pretty quickly.
Yeah, cannas sprout in my crawl space in the tote while they're waiting to be planted. So,
Cannas are pretty eager.
Yeah, they're ready to rock.
Whereas these things are kind of reluctant.
yeah, they really
Gotcha.
need the warmth and the coddling, and they're just going to do better for the summer if I can get them growing before I put them out.
Okay. All right. Let's see. So, Jen, I've got a question for you.
Sure.
This one came in anonymously.
Oh, asking for a friend?
Yes, asking for a friend. Last year, they say that bindweed made its way into the clematis and roses, and they're asking, is there any way to get rid of it, obviously without damaging the roses and clematis?
Well, get yourself something cozy to sit on or kneel on, because it's going to be a long. That is a tough
This is
weed
a by
to
hand
deal with. This is a
situation.
by hand situation. Bindweed is a morning glory, a wild morning glory, and it is one that will just, it gets its name because it grows and strangles whatever it's growing on. And it can get, like, I've seen, like, you just get like bundles of it around stuff, and it's
And the thing that makes it pernicious is the fleshy roots that
yes,
are
any little bit you can pull it, but any little bit you leave behind, you just started a whole new crop.
even in a vegetable garden. If you till it up, you're propagating it.
Yeah, you
Oh
just
my
made your
gosh.
problem 10 times worse.
Okay.
Yeah, because every little bit grows into a new plant. You could do like very careful application of Roundup, but you don't want to make sure that doesn't get on any green part of your roses or whatnot. Like if it's a really hefty bindweed specimen, you might be able to like remove what's growing on the top and then find like the stump and paint that with some like brush killer or Roundup.
Okay.
It's just if it's entwined in a clematis,
Yeah,
it's going to be really difficult
gonna be
to
like-
get one and not the other.
Yeah, and that's
Yikes.
where I'm saying, like, get your glasses on and get out there, and maybe a glass of something
Clear
with
your
you,
schedule
and
and
get
just-
out there and just, you're gonna have to
If you're really desperate, you might dig up the clematis,
yeah,
pick out the bindweed
pick out the
roots,
bindweed and
plant the
replant
clematis
it.
somewhere else.
Oh my.
And
Yeah.
then eradicate
Gotta
the
assess-
bindweed from
yeah,
that hole,
gotta
because you
assess
won't
the
dig up all of the bindweed.
Right, you won't. You just won't.
That
And-
problematic, huh?
oh my gosh,
It's one you don't wanna
that is
start.
like you're just.
No wonder they sent that one anonymous.
It's like that just kind of gives me like, kind of the dread.
Yikes.
Yeah,
That's a bad
yikes.
one, huh?
Like,
Okay.
like prepare yourself. It's probably going to be like not a one-shot deal. You're probably going to go back
and be working on
and be
that one.
working on that
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, we used to have a couple of patches of bindweed in some of the farm fields, and I remember Dad with a cultivator would go through those and he'd pick it up, and bindweed would just be all over the cultivator.
Yeah, and it just gets
And he,
tangled
and he
on
might have said a
equipment.
bad word or two.
Maybe one or two.
3.
Okay, well, no easy fix there. You've got your work cut out for you, for sure. All right, let's see. This is from Sandy Coleman. She says, I want to plant pumpkins in a large pot in the corner of my asparagus plot so it can spread after the season's asparagus. Will that cause any problems growing them in the same space?
Growing them in the same space, no.
Okay.
How big of a pot?
My question is with growing a pumpkin in a pot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because if a pumpkin needs lots of food, lots of space, lots of root area. And I question why you'd want it in a pot as opposed to in the ground next to the
Right,
asparagus.
it wouldn't hurt the
because
asparagus.
the asparagus is going to be grown up by the time pumpkins are vining, and then you get that sort of Three Sisters effect
Yeah.
where the pumpkin's on the ground and kind of shading the ground, and it it's not going to try to climb the asparagus. So I think having them together is not a horrible idea. Growing it in a pot is questionable, because if the pumpkin feels the least bit stunted, it may only make male blossoms, and then then you're kind of up the creek. I had a cousin who was growing one in his apartment
in a
In a
bucket?
pot?
Or-
in a pot or something, and he was it was vining out, and he was having all kinds of, and he was being Johnny or he was being a real horticulturist. He was taking pollen and then moving it from one flower to the other.
Oh, wow. He was
Just
invested.
pollinating male
Well,
flowers.
and he didn't get any pumpkins, and it was like I had to break it to him that he only had boys and
Couldn't make a pumpkin.
not going to make a pumpkin that way.
Not pumpkin vines in the house. That's
It was an apartment.
dedication.
It was an apartment.
In an
yeah.
apartment, that's
hardcore.
dedication. Yeah, definitely.
But I would think keeping up with the water would be horrendous too, as it got
Yeah,
more and more vines.
It would be really difficult not to stunt a pumpkin in a pot, I think.
Yeah.
You know, maybe if you wanted to grow like a zucchini in a pot, like a bush,
It's like a
Cucurbic.
smaller variety.
then maybe if it was like a half barrel.
Yeah, but I would just stick it in the ground.
put 'em in the ground?
Yeah, I don't
Asparagus, it
know
wouldn't hurt
why you
They
think-
anything.
won't
I don't know-
bother each other?
No.
Or?
It would,
Okay.
not particularly, I don't think, because the pumpkin is going to tend to be under the bulk of the asparagus foliage and might actually be a good companion.
Okay. All right. So just put them in the ground. Bypass the pot entirely. What about pruning fruit trees? Have you guys done that on your properties
should
yet?
have
I-
and didn't.
No? There was
certainly
a question
have.
about peach trees. So is
Yeah.
it too late?
It is not. I always tried to wait until I could see. First of all, had the flower buds
Oh,
survived,
Yeah, signs of life.
and then look for the buds to break. Typically, I would prune peaches probably last
Okay.
because you get some winter dieback. Peaches tend to overproduce flower buds, so you want to cut them back so that you're limiting how many flowers you're putting on. Otherwise, you're going to get those wonderful tasting little tiny peaches
The
that
little
are
ones.
the pit is bigger than the flesh. But I would wait until, well, this year they may be more advanced, but you know, into early April I would think would be okay.
Okay.
But then, you know, with peaches, you do it to open up the center so you get good light and air penetration, and then you cut back, like each of the fruiting sections, which is last year's growth, maybe up to half, just to kind of concentrate the energy.
Okay.
You know, you don't have to have a whip and a chair like with grapes, but it does help to cut them back some every year.
Okay. Anything to add there?
No, that's
Got it covered?
Yeah, so
Excellent.
it's not too late for me to
Yeah,
get out
see?
and look at mine.
No.
Not too
Yeah.
late. Okay. We've got about 5 minutes left. I know I wanted you to make sure you got to your book.
Okay, well, this is one that we're looking at for the International Herb Association Book of the Year. It's written by a friend of mine, Jane Hawley Stevens. She's up in the Baraboo area of Wisconsin, but she has a line of herbal products that she makes. And she came to my herb days about half of the 17 that I was there. She was an exhibitor there, and so we got to know each other pretty well. And she is really into celestial gardening, which is the whole moon sign, sun sign, some of the astrological
Yes,
signs.
yes.
And it's really hard to comprehend it all.
Wow.
And to try to follow it, I think you need to have one of the almanacs where it breaks down
Yes.
every day of every month into what is where you are, because as she talks about it, every 2.5 to 3 days you're in a different window. And
I know my father-in-law always tries to get potatoes in on Good Friday, and we were talking about that a little bit before the show, how that coincides with.
right, it has to do with a moon sign,
Yes,
so
yes.
there's actually some validity to that if you buy into the whole moon sign thing. My only caveat is that sometimes in the spring,
The weather.
the weather, the soil, you may only get 1 or 2 times to plant potatoes, for instance, and it's hard for me when the soil is right, when the temperature's right, when I'm there to do it.
Right,
I'm
right.
feeling
I've got time.
good.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to get the almanac and say, is this going to be okay?
Yes,
So
right.
but if you have always wanted to do that, Jane's book, The Celestial Garden,
Excellent.
is, I think, fairly unique in how much detail it goes into.
But grab the Farmer's Almanac just to give you some supplemental.
as a helpful thing.
Excellent. Okay.
I also do I have time to?
Yeah, we've got about a minute and a half.
There's something I want to talk about because we've talked about the daffodils that I bought fall before last. I put them in. There was a little bit of a crust. I had my bulb planter. I had to jam it through the frost. And they came up. The double pink ones bloomed pretty well. The double
Hey.
yellow ones, up to half of them really didn't ever really show, or they maybe had one little leaf that showed a little bit, which was kind of disappointing. But you know, like
It is what it is.
it was late in the season, and
Yeah,
you know,
like
what
what
are
do
you
you got
going
to
to do?
lose? Yeah.
What's happened this year is every one of those double yellows that didn't come up last year is there,
Wow.
And doing great.
and they're doing great. They don't have flower buds, the ones that didn't grow last year,
Interesting.
but somehow they went through that whole year underground and still came up this spring.
I bet you'll get flowers next year.
Just
yeah.
one more
I mean,
year. Hold
yeah.
out one more year.
The leaves are looking robust, and I would be shocked if I didn't get flowers
Very
next
nice.
year.
There was a year that I picked up bulbs on super duper clearance in December or something like, and I was like mudding them in, and they, yeah,
And they bloom.
they bloomed, and they're still going strong today. It was like over 10 years ago.
So I just thought you'd throw that out there
Well,
and see if
thank you.
anybody else had had that experience. It
Yeah.
sounds like Jen has had that
So
experience.
don't
but
give up.
Don't
is
always
the
try.
The mantra of this show is don't
Yep.
give up. Real quick, we want to say thanks to Donna because she's been in the kitchen again, making candies and cookies. Chuck's sister always makes sure that we're well fed.
I finally got her to make lemon thyme cookies. I had a lemon thyme plant last year, so
All right, we've got about
So-
10 seconds left. Thank you guys for coming in. Thank you so much for watching, and we're going to get out of here so I can enjoy a cookie. So we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Good night.